I'm a sunburned guy. Deal with it and move on. What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video and welcome to another 31 Days of Halloween 2018. It is 2018, something like that. Look guys, over the course of the past 10 years I've been on this channel, surely at some point I'll review 31 horror movies, and then I'll have them in a playlist that you can watch in October and be like, wow, there's 31 of these. But until then, I need to do my part by reviewing The Exorcist Believer.
It bleeds. We can kill it.
I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
I will hunt you down wherever you're hiding, and I will eliminate you. I am justice.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff. You can either ignore it or you can help me to stop it.
Okay, what is this? Now, The Exorcist Believer is not normally the type of movie I would review on this channel, but something miraculous and incredible and wonderful happened in my movie theater that made me want to talk about it. Something so holy that it could only be the big man upstairs intervening. Literally. Basically, also, the only other reason I wanted to make this video is just to say that I don't get it. I don't get the way that people have responded to this film. I don't quite understand the hate. I like The Exorcist 1973. I think it's a fine film. I don't love it. I watched it a second time this year in theaters. That was a great experience. It was pretty solid. I really warmed up to the film, and seeing it in theaters made me understand how an audience in 1973 could walk away thinking that was the scariest film ever made. But I don't think it's very scary, nor do I think it's the best horror movie ever made. I do think it has a very powerful, unsettling factor to it, but I don't think it's the scariest film ever. It's not my favorite horror movie by far. Films like The Fly, The Thing, Jaws, The Silence of the Lambs all come to mind as films that I think are more compelling and scarier. I mean, The Silence of the Lambs is the scariest movie I think I've ever seen, but I guess that comes down to if you're afraid of God or serial killers. That leads us to the new film, The Exorcist sequel, which is like, what, the 6th Exorcist movie? Just crazy that there's so many of them. I'm gonna keep it spoiler free here because it's new, so if you want to go see it, go see it. The story follows Victor, played by Leslie Odom Jr., and his daughter Angela, played by Lydia Jewett. They have this strong, friendly bond between the two of them, and one day Angela asks to go over to her friend's house to study after school, and Victor agrees, but unbeknownst to him, the girls do not go to the friend's house. Instead, they pull a Slender Man and go into the forest to do this little ritual, all in order to get Angela to communicate with her deceased mother. They're trying to communicate through the afterlife, and thus the possession begins. So the film's really about Angela and her friend Catherine, played by Olivia O'Neill, who go missing, and then Victor has to start investigating along with Catherine's parents, Miranda, played by Jennifer Nettles, and Tony, played by Norbert Leo Buds. Eventually, both girls returned home, only to turn out to be possessed and in need of an exorcism, which eventually leads Victor to Ellen Burstyn's Chris MacNeil returning from the original film. Now, of course, while Linda Blair's Regan has appeared in The Exorcist 2, I do think this is the first time we've ever seen Ellen Burstyn return in an Exorcist film. So what doesn't work about this movie? The film is way too fast-paced. The girls go missing really quickly into the movie, and so we don't get enough time to see the bond between them and their parents. Specifically, Victor and Angela, who are the main protagonists of this film, we spend like 1 or 2 scenes with them before she goes missing, and we barely throughout the entire film spend any time with Catherine and her family. I mean, they feel more like afterthoughts or props rather than actual characters meant to be fleshed out. You really couldn't care less what happens to Catherine over the course of the film, and you certainly don't care about her family until the very ending. The girl's possession also happens like really rapidly and quickly. All of the sudden, the sense of humanity that Regan maintained until the end of the original film is completely lost. That was one of the things that worked so well about Regan, is you could tell that the real Regan was in there and she was trying to fight it and she wanted to be herself, but she just couldn't. That sense of humanity was being squashed over the course of the movie, and in this one, the very first scene when the girls are returned home, they are fully possessed, full on gone. Just made that transition happen way too quickly, and so we didn't really feel the loss. This film also makes the mistake of thinking that little girls are creepy. It thinks that we're afraid of the little girls when we're not. We're afraid of the demon that's inside of them. The demon is supposed to be the spooky one. The demon is supposed to be the one with a personality. The demon in the original film has a very intense personality, and it's a lot of fun to see the way that personality manifests over the course of the film and how vulgar it is and how vile it is, and you can tell it wants to just torment everybody around it. It's got a real distinct sense of self, and you kind of get the sense that the demon in the original film is just the most excellent bullshitter in human history. I kind of get the impression that it's kind of weak. I get the impression that it wants you to think it's a lot more powerful than it is, and in this film, like, I don't even know did these demons think they were powerful? Did they, is it supposed to be the same demon? Because there's a scene when Ellen Burstyn's character shows up and she's like, I know you and you know me. We've met before. Do you? Is this supposed to be the same demon? Because if it is, the personality is completely different. We also are missing, and this is a key ingredient of what makes the original film work, we are missing our connection to our priest. In this film, Father Maddox, we barely spend any time with him. The incredible presence that Father Karras brought to the original film, that type of character is missing. Karras is my favorite character in the original Exorcist, and we don't have a character like that in this at all. The entire plot is focused on just the possessed girls. So then when at the end of the movie, Father Maddox shows up, you're supposed to know who he is and care, and it's like, I don't know who this guy is, and I don't care what happens to him. This film's also overly ghostly in my opinion. Like, I know that's probably a thing that only I would say, but I think this movie just lacks the nuance of the original film, where in the original film, until about the very ending, you can kind of have a sense of being like, is she possessed, or is this kind of in her head? Where in this film, they're like flying off the ground and like blood vomiting volcanoes of blood onto the ceiling. And there's a scene when both girls spit out this spiritual specter like of mist. The mist is fought by another, I guess, a godly mist. That stuff just doesn't work for me. I preferred it when it's more subtle, because the more subtle it is, the more real it feels and the scarier it feels as a result. I'm okay with Reagan levitating off the bed. It was spooky because it only happened the one time. This film's also pretty mean-spirited, by the way. There's a couple scenes that I'm really scratching my head on why those were included in the film. Really mean-spirited way they treat some of the characters here. Also, the ending of the movie felt like a plot twist worthy of a Saw film rather than a sequel to The Exorcist. I swear I could feel Hello Zepp playing over the ending scene. In fact, I think that would have made the ending scene actually more entertaining and work better, because at least then we'd be in the mood for a plot twist, when it was just so predictable and it just didn't land for me. It was like, whatever, where's Jigsaw? Clearly this movie had no clue how to use Chris McNeil. She shows up and is set up to basically be the Laurie Strode of this film. Laurie Strode, Halloween 18 style. She's this badass character stepping back into the ring with her old nemesis. This is not who she was in the first film. And it's clear that that was the kind of energy they wanted to capture, especially because it's the same creative team as Halloween 18. But like, wow, they missed the mark wildly here. I feel bad for Ellen Burstyn. I feel bad that she returned as a result. It's just a waste of potential and also just a misuse of the character. In fact, I could have gone for about 90% less of her. I don't think she should have come back to meet the girls who are possessed. I think she should have just offered her advice, stayed home, and that was that. That would have been far more compelling for me. Also, and most importantly, this film merely uses religion. This film is not a religious film. This film, I don't think, believes anything that it says. It doesn't believe all the religious aspects that it's portraying. The thing that made the original movie work was how heavily religious it was. So I know I just gave like a huge list of things that I disliked about the movie, and yet I'm saying that I don't understand where people are coming from in terms of their reviews for it, but that's because there is a list of things I did enjoy. So let me get into that. Leslie Odom Jr., I think he is wonderful in this film. Victor carries such a fantastic screen presence. He really elevated the whole movie for me. I think he's a really likable and relatable and rootable protagonist. I think he's very compelling. In fact, I would say, and this is going to be a controversial statement, the journey he goes on in this film is more compelling than the one Chris goes on in the original film. The only difference is hers was way more prolonged, had way more time to breathe, was dedicated way more screen time, and so she was more emotional and desperate as a result. So her performance was more powerful. She was allowed to have more time to grieve, and you really felt the weight of what she was going through, where here, so much is happening so quickly until the end of the movie that you really don't get a sense of how desperate Victor is, and so it doesn't work on the same level. But I would say overall, the whole cast actually did a pretty good job with a few exceptions. Victor and Angela and Anne, who's a character I haven't mentioned yet, played by Anne Dowd, they were really strong characters. They really worked for me. These were strong performances and characters that I found very compelling. I also thought the moral message of the film about coming together and rising up as a group, I thought that worked really, really well. I liked seeing everybody band together, and it was more like the relationships we form together is what powers our spiritual connection, not necessarily our faith. And I found that to be a very strong message that is a very important one as well. I mean, there's a whole wide range of religious beliefs portrayed in this film, and all of them eventually come together for the benefit of these girls, and that was really powerful stuff. Also, the bond between Victor and Angela was really powerful for the 1 or 2 scenes we got of them. It was actually, I thought, much stronger than Reagan and her mother. The only difference is we saw way more of Reagan and her mother in that original movie before Reagan becomes possessed, and in this film it's like we get 1 or 2 scenes of it. We just needed more because this film doesn't give us enough. Having 2 girls possessed, it's also a very interesting concept. I don't really think I've seen that in a ghost film before, or a possession film, certainly not in an Exorcist movie. So I thought it was an interesting concept, at least for this franchise. It made the stakes feel a little higher and a little more fresh, and it also introduces at least some sort of interesting elements in the end of the movie. Which is also to say, I really liked that this film doesn't just follow the same exact story of the original film super closely, although there are some pretty pretty direct and blatant homages to the original film in terms of beats that they are repeating in this movie, which is nothing new for David Gordon Green. He of course did the same thing in the Halloween movies. But overall, the plot was brand new, and so the film felt like a fresh sequel as a result. Also, and this is going to be like one of my hottest takes of all, I think, I actually really like David Gordon Green as a director. I really enjoyed the Halloween trilogy. I like all three of those films. I liked seeing a similar style to that of Halloween 18 brought to this film. It had a similar style and tone. I like his filmmaking style. I think he's kind of a weird director. I think this film would have been pretty boring if they had gone the Oscar bait route, because it's never gonna work. They're never gonna pull it off. They're never gonna achieve the status and the prestige of the original film. So I'm glad that David Gordon Green looked at that and went, I'm gonna do something different. If they had done this Oscar bait film, I think it would have fallen even further than this one does. Also, the first act of this movie I thought was really, really solid. Very compelling. I thought the first act was more compelling than anything we saw in the original film. The second act was really rushed, but at least it started very scary. I thought the scares in the second act started stronger than anything we saw in the first movie. It just kind of tapers out into nothing the longer the movie goes on. We lose the eeriness of the original movie and that overwhelming religious presence. It's just not in this one. So what went wrong with this movie, and where did it gain the reputation it did? I just think it's because they should have never made a sequel to The Exorcist. It's not a movie that deserves a sequel. The movie was such a perfect standalone film. When I say deserve, I mean don't do it to the original. The movie's better than that. It doesn't need a sequel. It doesn't need it. Having any sort of follow-up to it is going to lessen the impact of the first film, so it was a mistake to do a sequel in the first place, and it's a mistake they've been making since the first one came out. Also, nowadays, the market is so horribly oversaturated with ghost movies and possession movies. We get like 32 a day. We just have way too many of them, and with films like The Conjuring being new and fresh and scary, at least back when The Conjuring came out, it's just scarier than anything this film could achieve. The pacing was also way too fast, because modern day horror movies don't know how to take their time. They don't know how to tell a slow story. They don't know how to give things time to breathe. It doesn't have the time to be scary, and it just completely deflates the tension. This film was not given close enough care with the religious aspects either. Like, the religious characterization in the first film is what makes it such a powerful film. It elevates it beyond the ghost movie genre. It elevates it beyond the possession movie genre. Most films use possessions and ghosts and exorcists and religion as tools to fuel the plot. The Exorcist was a film that did the exact opposite. The plot came about as a result of all of that. It's not a scary film. What's scary about it? A girl's head spins around and she looks a little freaky? The Exorcist isn't a scary movie. People aren't afraid of just the mere ghost alone. That's not what made the film work. What made the film work is that people are just terrified of the afterlife. People are terrified of the unknown and what comes next. Father Karras was our representation for that fear. That guy was going through the ark with us. And on the other end, we had Reagan, who was being tormented by a spirit from the other side. It's just a perfect blend of subtle religion, because the movie is not overtly religious. It's not making overt religious statements. This one's just like, God's real, women can fly when they're possessed by the devil, and also watch them vomit volcanoes of blood and say vulgar things. Is that spooky? And that's not what made the first one spooky. Why am I reviewing this? Well, first of all, I've got big stuff going on this week, so I'm busy with the big stuff, so I gotta do something little like this. But also because I was just wildly confused by the amount of hate this movie was getting, because it's just not that bad. I thought it was a good movie. I would say it's a good film. It's a fine film. It's underwhelming for sure, but any sequel to The Exorcist is gonna be. The Exorcist has a reputation beyond the original film itself. The movie does not even live up to its expectations and its reputation. A lot of people are so afraid to revisit it that they don't realize how tame it is. And so doing a sequel to it, it's gonna be put to this high pedestal, and it's never gonna live up to it, because nothing can live up to the mythical expectations that are set by the original film. This movie started really good. The longer it went on, the more bland it got, the more bored I became with it, but it never got to the point where I was like, this is just bad. I'd give this movie like a 6.5 out of 10. I thought it was more good than bad, but just a little. I mean, I think everything had its potential. It could have been really good if it fleshed itself out, but it just didn't. So I'd say it's a 6.5 out of 10. I think that's a pretty fair rating. It's not as bad as people say. I think with a few tweaks, it could have been a 7 or an 8 out of 10. But I would give this movie a 10 out of 10 for an excellent projector experience. And that's what I gotta talk about here. Because the day before I went to see The Exorcist, the first one, at the Fathom Events re-release, it was a really awkward audience. Like, it was a loud audience. They were moving constantly. People coming in like 30, 40 minutes into the movie to sit down. There was this woman wearing just tons of metal patches and like jewelry and chains, just jingling her way through the theater, and she got up like 3 times. And then the projector room was awkward. I sat almost in the very back, and it was noisy. Like, you could hear the people up there were in an argument. There was people up there in the projector room in an argument, and then it sounded like one guy up there just started watching Netflix with the volume on. You could just hear it coming through the projector window. And the only reason I feel the need to mention that is because then the second movie we were making jokes about like, like, oh, what's the projector experience on this one going to be like? And it was fine throughout the movie. The theater was fine, the audience was fine, but all of a sudden the end credits started playing, and the big man upstairs, literally a big guy up there in the projector room, walked into the projector and bumped it, and it went kunk. And all of a sudden the screen totally started glitching out. There's apparently 2 projectors that were overlaid because they fell out of alignment, and all of a sudden the screen just started going crazy mode. And so I made the joke in the moment that I had to review the movie because then I could use that footage in a video. So I did.
Well, I do love the Flash. What's happening? It's Is it gonna miss it? Oh no.
Alright, that's the Exorcist believer. Why did I review this movie exactly? I don't know, just because I could. I hope you enjoyed. Well, comment below and let me know what your thoughts on it are. I'd be very curious to hear what you think. Did you like it more than the first? Probably not, but let me know. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It's through the support of Patreon that I can do videos like this for you guys, like videos that are just kind of throwaway videos that surely my audience isn't going to enjoy. It's through the support of Patreon that I can do stuff like this and explore the types of content that I would do for fun. So big thank you to the patrons for making stuff like this happen. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man out.